Chapter 102. Were you expecting the competition for the showers to be the highest drama part of gym class? Alden asked Hoyu as the two of them headed down a broad avenue toward north of North Gym. It was a 10-minute walk from the MPE building, right on the edge of campus, and apparently, they had both had the same idea when they discovered they were going to have to wait for their turns anyway. Hoyu was gulping from a water bottle. I'm glad my group was getting along well. I think the one with the speedsters in it had some kind of issue. They seemed tense. Finley had looked pretty mad. It was the first time Alden had seen the Scottish boy in anything but a cheerful mood. I didn't have the attention span to watch the man run from Snake's tennis ball pitches. It somehow adds insult to injury that he makes you chase the balls down after they hit you. When they reached the airy glass building that Alden thought was the main gym, the same girl in lime green yoga pants who'd been protecting the entrance from riffraff and gawkers on his first visit greeted them both warmly. She was giving out cups of some of the liquefied salads that the spa upstairs bottled and sold as drinks. They both took one. As they headed toward the showers, Hoyu sipped the black pepper beet juice he'd chosen and wrinkled his nose. I don't think I'm old enough to drink this. Alden raised an eyebrow at him. I'm trying, Hoyu said. Being friends with Lexi's heart. He got really serious about nutrition in the past year or two. I saw him cut a single piece of chocolate in half once. And there I was stuffing 6 in my mouth at a time. I want to eat healthy, but I like candy so much. And anything fried. Is that why you bought the slow cooker? Hoyu nodded. That, and because my mom kept telling me I shouldn't buy it because I wouldn't ever use it. I'm going to use it every day. And send her pictures. Starting tonight. The bouncing oatmeal was just a temporary setback. It didn't even taste that bad. He looked curiously at a man casting spells on a section of the climbing wall as they passed it. I'm so glad you've got a membership here, too. I really wanted one, and my parents wanted me to have it. But I almost told them not to buy it for me because it's so, Richie. Yes. Mom and Dad both come here, but they have to. They need the facilities and a heavy gym. I could probably have used the school equipment until I was halfway through uni. But everything here is so much nicer, and I used to play on the rock wall in the on-site daycare and just imagine how great it was going to be when I was finally 15 and I could use the real one. They consented to have high winds, floods, and earthquakes. I went for it. And you're here, too. We'll both look Richie together, and it won't be as awkward when we leave school to use the better stuff. Happy to spoil myself with you. They walked past an attendant into the room with the big rainfall showers and the ridiculously fluffy scented towels. Hoyu beamed at him. Sue, since you're here with me, and you're not going to freak out about it, I'll confess that I actually already have potion therapy sauna slots booked for a few days a week until the end of term. I was always planning to come here instead of using the student showers. Alden blinked at him. The potion saunas had been a part of his facilities tour. For 100 gold, or more depending on which sauna you chose, you could sweat and inhale magical substances that did rather out there sounding things. Are you having your spirit waxed or? No. Hoyu laughed. Is that even real? I'm using the recovery sauna. Potions aren't as good as healers, obviously, but if I sit in there for 90 minutes or so, I don't really need to rest on my rest days, and I don't get too sore. I'm just going to do my homework in there instead of sitting through study halls. My mom did sauna homework her whole last year of uni. It was her idea. And since I wasn't saying no to the gym membership, I wasn't going to say no to something like this. He's basically turning the 2-hour study hall into recovery time. Alden wondered if Mrs. Zhangdemir had been attempting to balance out Hoyu's lifestyle when she tried to set a dorm decorating budget. That's very efficient, said Alden. I'm telling you so you can book a slot tonight, if you want to do homework together. And so you're not like, where did Hoyu go? Is he trying to get away from me? When I jump straight out of the shower and run off to the sauna instead of heading back to the dorms with you. Gotcha. Do you want to come? Isn't it a lot of famous people sitting around in towels together, talking about superhero stuff? That sounded like a high-pressure environment to do homework in unless your parents were famous superheroes and you were used to them. I've only used it a few times so far. It's not that many people, and they're all zoned out watching videos or working on their interfaces. They don't talk and interrupt my studying, so it's good. Let me think about it. Line of asterisks. Alden had a couple of minutes to debate it while they both rinsed off. Pro: doing homework with Hoyu was in line with his mission to be a great roommate. Con: shirtlessness. Pro: trying the new magic thing with someone his own age for backup instead of facing down a bunch of 40-year-olds who could create waterspouts and pitch rail cars by himself. Con: money. Pro: feeling good tomorrow instead of feeling ouch tomorrow. The cons aren't really cons. He didn't want to be shy about the tattoo forever with the people he actually lived with. And as for the money, Alden had given half of it to Bo so that his family and friends would be taken care of no matter where he was. He'd be spending half of what he had left on supplies, gear, and calling fees to make himself the most absurdly well-equipped and well-connected rabbit on the true planets the next time he was summoned. A little would be set aside in his backup emergency fund. But all the rest of it, he'd just about talked himself into spending $1 million however he wanted. As fast as he felt like. When the mood struck him, Nia had told him to save it for down payment on his future immortality, and everything on the internet was about preparing for retirement. Meanwhile, the tiny remnants of the person he'd been in January kept shouting that this much money should last him until he was a wrinkly old man. He thought all of them were overconfident in his ability to make it to the wrinkly stage of life. Besides, even if he did live to a ripe old age, 2 or 3 short summonings a year would make for a decent salary by his standards. He'd be absolutely floored if he only got summoned twice a year. Mind made up, he flicked through his interface and booked a recovery sauna slot. Then he quickly checked the North of North website to make sure he actually understood what you were supposed to do in potion saunas. Just sit there. No clothes or shoes. Towels. Shower first. No noisy, bright, or smelly spells. No food. Respect the tranquility of the environment. Gee, they don't tell her to hide your workout. That's an oversight. He could go with under the wrist cuff or on a thigh. The Oriad was getting more and more helpful every day about staying put comfortably wherever he wanted it to. A couple of minutes later, towel around his waist, he was stepping into the sauna. It was hot and spacious with soft lighting and steam. 5 women, 3 men, and Hoyu each had plenty of room to themselves on the 2 tiers of pale wood benches. Alden assumed it was all normal enough. For Apex anyway. The adults mostly had that fit and flawless look about them that was so common in this gym he hardly ever noticed it anymore. And there was a little bitty cauldron on a pedestal in the middle of the floor. The clear substance inside was blood bloobing, and he thought it was the source of the watermelonish scent. Hoyu smiled brightly and waved him over. "I'm going to watch all the drone footage of my rescues first," he said quietly. "And then we have that reading assignment on outsmarting enemies for offense." Alden sat down beside him. By the time he'd started to sweat, he'd gotten over the inherent oddness of doing homework in such an uncommon environment, mostly because Hoyu was a dedicated student. Alden couldn't stay hung up on towel etiquette while they were having a serious texting conversation about whether saving 2 of the sandbags at once would increase rescue speed enough to justify the difficulty, risk, and/or talent strain. The time went by quickly. A gym employee brought water for them and a refill potion for the tiny cauldron just as he finished up the reading for Instructor Klein. It had already been an hour. His homework was half done. He felt tired, but a little less so than when he'd sat down. Either his body liked saunas or it liked inhaling magic steam. Most of the people who'd been here to start with were gone. There was just one woman wearing cucumbers over her eyes while she lounged on the top bench. Which was technically having food in the sauna, wasn't it? He glanced over at Hoyu. His dark hair was stuck to his forehead, and his mouth was moving slightly. He was one of those people who did that even when they were reading silently. Alden kept at his own homework. Cucumber Lady left about 15 minutes later. Alden was busy watching a video, so he wouldn't have noticed. But as soon as she closed the door behind her, Hoyu said, "Why can she wear food, but we can't eat food?" I was thinking the same thing. Hoyu looked over at him. "Thanks for studying with me. I didn't beg too much, did I? I know it's expensive. I just got excited to have a gym buddy. The only other people I know of who are even close to our age here are a couple of uni first years. This is fun. I probably wouldn't ever have tried it if you hadn't asked, so I'm glad you did," Alden said. "I was more worried about wearing my towel backwards than the money." Hoyu looked thoughtful. "I don't think you could wear a towel backward. What if I got here and everyone else had turned theirs into a toga? Or they were supposed to be for our heads instead of our waists?" Hoyu snorted. "It could happen. You Anisidorans have weird customs. Spas have weird customs. Magic has weird customs. All three combined in one location? If I'd walked in and found out we all had to remove our towels and bow to the cauldron, I wouldn't have been very surprised." "You were supposed to do that." Alden stared at him. The other boy's expression was sincere. "It's all right that you didn't do it. Since it was your first time, nobody expected you to know. Lexi's right about you. You do deliver jokes in the exact same tone as serious material." Hoyu grinned. "What if you do that to someone? You can't do that. Someone like Jeffy will totally get naked and worship a wizard soup pot. Jokes are funnier when they're subtle." He lifted an arm up and over his head to start a shoulder stretch. "I'm glad you wanted to try it. I was a lot more focused knowing someone else was doing the same assignments." Hoyu's not going to mention it. Alden was gratified but not really surprised. He's so good-natured. And his mom. Alden decided he wasn't going to get a better chance to bring it up himself. "Do you think our classmates will make a big deal about the tattoo when they see it?" Arm still bent behind his head, Hoyu cut his eyes toward him. "It's real, right?" "Yes. You just have to ignore them," Hoyu said. "You're rooming with me and Lexi and Lude. Plus everyone's already talking about how something crazy happened to you. And you're a rabbit. The purity people have already slotted you in with the rest of us. They are stupid and they just repeat whatever their parents say, so who cares?" Alden felt like he was missing at least a couple of social factors that Hoyu was treating as obvious. "The purity people? You know, the ones who are like, anyone who wants to work for the Artonans is an alien bumkisser. Anyone who gets summoned all the time cares more about money than human pride. Those people. I think there are only one or two in our whole class who are seriously that way." He dropped his arm and shrugged. "I haven't noticed," said Alden. "Sometimes it's someone who's lost a family member to an emergency summons, and then, I understand. They are grieving and angry. But usually it's just the kids of contract refusers, or people who've never been called at all for some reason, and they want to act like not being a part of that aspect of avowed life somehow makes them better than everyone else. So they're assholes. Mostly. Those people are going to be terrible no matter what, so I say don't worry about them. Everyone else." Hoyu's brows suddenly lowered. "Maybe I wouldn't flash it around the locker room, after all. Even if most of them don't really have a problem with private contracts, they are still going to say stupid things and gossip about it. It's the same reason I don't tell most people when my parents are doing something dangerous." He nodded once, as if to settle the matter, then added, "And obviously don't worry about me. Or any mature people. Mom and Dad both have tattoos. From True Planet's work and from the demon suppression. Everyone who helps with that gets a secrecy one. And Lexi's little sister has 8 now. Half of them are turtles," said Alden. Hoyu laughed. "Lexi won't admit it, but he's super worried that his parents are wrong and they won't actually wash off. I think he's already planning to murder anyone who says anything about the fact that Irina is blue." Line of asterisks. They headed back to the dorm in the dark, and they met a rolling cafeteria delivery drone on the way that had half of Hoyu's supper in it. "Listen," Hoyu said, walking backward while he pleaded with a slowly trundling box, "that's my vegetable rice. I'm Hoyu Zhangdamir, Garden Hall, Suite 208. That's me. My name's on your lid display. Give it to me, And I'll get to eat it sooner and you'll get to go back to the cafeteria sooner. It makes sense. Beep, the drone said angrily when Hoyu moved to block its way again. Not beep. Rice. My rice. I want it. Alden was trying not to lose it. I don't think it understands you. It probably can't give it to you until it reaches the room. It's such a slow, dumb one. Why does CNH have slow, dumb drones? Alden coughed. You want me to pick it up? They make a huge racket and report you to drone operations if you interfere with their delivery for more than a second or two, and then an operator scolds you, said Hoyu, stepping out of the drone's path and rolling his eyes. No, I mean. Tell me to pick it up. Hoyu blinked. You mean with your skill? I recover from fatigue quickly, so it will work for this. And the drone can't beep or report if it's preserved, right? We're just going to help it get to our room faster. That's crazy. Drone operations is going to think it learned to teleport. Let's do it. Pick it up. Alden swooped down on the drone. A few minutes later, laughing like dumbasses, they set the rolling box down in front of the doors to Garden Hall, then hid behind a planter watching it. It's so freaked out, Hoyu whispered, watching the box sit there silently. How did I get here? Alden whispered back. Where am I? I am full of rice and confusion. You're so weird. Shut up. You're hiding behind a pepper plant with me. Peppers. Are these ones we can take? Oh, it's figured it out. I'm getting a delivery notice. He bounced over to the drone, and its lid popped open. You two look happy, Lute said when they stepped into the room shortly after that. He was lying on the Chesterfield, reading one of Hoyu's Chinese comic books. Downright vibrant compared to Lexi. He staggered in, ate some of the food in the cooker, and he's been in the tub ever since. Does he bathe with his whip? Maybe. He is a meister. They do things like that, said Hoyu, setting his container of rice on the counter and lifting the lid on the chicken onion dish he'd concocted. This doesn't look bad. It's really good with ramen, said Lute. It is? I have to call my mom. Alden told himself he was content with the liquid salad he'd bought on the way out of the gym and the bean burgers he was microwaving. He carried his plate into the living room and took Lexi's favorite armchair. The self-mastery word chin was fantastic, he told Lute between bites of burger. Lute dropped the comic book on the ottoman and rolled over to look at him. It's cool, right? I don't think I'd want to use it every day, since this shirt now has a hole burned into the back of it that seemed like a completely reasonable thing to do at the time. But it was so good in the gym. It ran out about the time Big Snake started pelting me with death balls. Death balls. Tennis balls at deadly speeds. Hoyu called. I know I was only my normal self again, and my normal self is pretty good at running around and duking. But I felt so awkward all of the sudden. Like my limbs got stupider. Yeah, I'm always disappointed in my natural state of being when it fizzles out, too. Do you still want to learn it? I need to pay the debt. Can't we do that tonight? Lute looked at the plate on Alden's lap. Sure. But not while you're eating. I bit my own finger doing that once. Hoyu sat down with them a minute later, with a pile of food he'd very obviously tried to make photogenic. We've done it. Our first official day at school. You cute little first years, said Lute. You're a first year, too, said Hoyu. Yeah, but I'm a grizzled old veteran first year. I bet you two don't even know which of the toilets on campus have spells and gag flushes on them. Hoyu and Alden exchanged looks. I feel like we need more details, said Alden. Absolutely not. It's a rite of passage to figure it out yourself. He looked at Alden's plate again. You finished your burgers. How much fun can Hoyu and I have at your expense? What do you mean? As a friend, I should tell you to go get in bed for the night before I drop the debt on you. But, as a friend, I think you should let us observe you a while instead. Is he going to be funny? He's going to be so funny. Lute was grinning. Hoyu looked excited. Line of asterisks. Alden Thorne was pretty sure he'd done it. He'd just become a great roommate. Would a not great roommate let two teenage boys who were laughing like hyenas watch him try to wash dishes when he was in this state? He didn't think so. The feet are more important, he told himself. Pay attention to your balance. He stood firm. The cup he'd been washing fell out of his hand into the small sink and sent soapy water splashing onto the floor. For the third time. What the hell? It came out sounding like Waddle. His tongue now had a disturbing habit of skipping over sounds. He accessed their roommate group chat. Alden, Loot, did you somehow give me a triple dose of this shit? Hoyu was on the floor mopping spills with a kitchen towel they only owned thanks to his mother and her assistant explaining that kitchen towels were a must-have item. Loot was lying on his back on the table, clutching his stomach. They were both howling. Alden, I can't even talk. This can't be normal. It wasn't exactly that he couldn't talk. With careful effort, he could talk, stand up safely, or move his hands the way he wanted to. But doing all three at once was suddenly rocket science. Loot had even insisted on checking the water temperature before he put his hands in the sink. Apparently with this half of the word chain, you could be minimally aware of the fact that you were boiling yourself. IP promise it's only one. Luke gasped. After you finish the dishes, let's try brushing your teeth. Alden, if there's a fire tonight, I'll die. I'll never make it down the stairs. We'd carry you. Hoyu said from the floor as another stream of bubbles slipped over the edge toward him. Lexi, scowling, stepped into the kitchen right then. He was in pajama pants. He crossed his arms over his bare chest. Why are you three so loud, and what did you do too? Hi, said Alden. I'm fine. His arm overshot the drain board by a mile, and a fork clattered across the tile counter. Don't fall. Hoyu shouted. I'm not falling, thought Alden. But Hoyu was on his feet suddenly and Alden was being caught and set upright, so he must have been falling. Lexi walked over to the sink, his eyes wide. Are you drunk? He hissed in Alden's ear. Did you two get him drunk? Yeah, that's it, said Loot. Just look at all this booze we've got lying around. I'm not drunk. I'm Jeff the master now. Probably I'm just not the master of myself right now was an overly ambitious sentence. He is drunk. He looks just like a drunk person on television. He sounds just like a drunk person. He's not drunk, said Hoyu, trying to square Alden's shoulders from behind like he was straightening an unruly shelf. Or knifing? Alden asked as Lexi leaned toward him and inhaled. Alden, he's sniffing me. Stop it, Lexi. I don't have beer breath. Luke started cackling again. It's a clumsiness word chain, Hoyu said. That's why he sounds fine on the room chat but not with his mouth. It seems pretty strong. Luke gave it to him. Pretty strong? Lexi asked, staring as another tricky fork made a bid for freedom. We aren't letting him wash knives. Lexi frowned. Should you be letting him stand up? Alden, I'm a good roommate. I'm washing all the dishes by myself. Hoyu's keeping you upright. Alden, he's a good roommate, too. Hoyu, thank you. That's not a dish you're washing though. It's the pear you knocked in the sink earlier. Alden looked down to see himself scrubbing the peel off a green pear with the dish brush. He set the fruit aside with as much dignity as he could. Lexi looked at them all, then he sighed and went to fetch the forks. After the dishes, they all three followed Alden around while he attempted to go through his nighttime routine. Equal amounts of teasing and mother hunting were involved. They wouldn't let him trip over the edges of the rugs, maybe he shouldn't have bought quite such thick ones, and bust his face. But they absolutely all stood there snickering while he tried to get toothpaste out of the tube onto his brush. Don't waste it, said Hoyu as Alden stared down at the tablespoonful of green paste oozing down the sides of the brush onto his hand. Put it all in your mouth. It's not a mistake, you guys. Luke said. He wanted that much. You should have seen what he ate for lunch. Anisiter and social dynamic, said Lexi. Spit goes in the sink. Alden, et tu, Lexi? Why do we randomly say Anisiter and social dynamic to Alden sometimes? Luke asked as he finished brushing. Alden glanced at them all in the mirror. Lexi's expression was neutral. Alden, because I whined about Lexi keeping Anisiter and social dynamics to himself when he knew I was ignorant. I was being a dick. About Loot. He felt even worse about that now. Compared to Lexi? Loot asked. Alden, that time I was. Loot gasped in mock horror. Cool. Ancestor and social dynamic, remember you have to pee before bed. For real. Lexi and Hoyu both looked startled. What kind of word chain is this? Lexi asked for the third time. Line of asterisks. Alden wasn't sure about the lack of bodily awareness being great for sleeping. He might just have been tired after the day he'd had. But he was drifting off easily, right on the brink of unconsciousness, when the notification came in. Video call from 2763rd General View Lart single quote H, Artona connection fee waived. Alden stared at it. Stuart was calling. Early. It shouldn't have been much of a surprise. Alden was up in the middle of the night a lot, and Stuart knew that. But I'm in bed. And my tongue is broken. He reached up and slapped at the switch for the reading light over his bunk. When he finally got it on, he accepted the call with a thought. View Lart single quote H's black hair and pale pink eyes appeared. She was in her cushioned window seat again. The human is very loosey-goosey greater than today, Stu, she reported. He is in bed. Loosey-goosey? Alden was going to have to look into the word that was being translated that way. Did we wake him up? Stuart inserted his face between his sister and the tablet. Did we wake you up? I'm sorry. I called as soon as I got home. I wasn't thinking about the time as much as I should have been. View Lart single quote H gave them both a curious look. It's all right, Alden said slowly in the least loosey-goosey Artonan he could manage. Think only about the tongue. Only the tongue. I'm on the bad half of a word chain now. Do you mind if we send text messages instead? Or talk in the morning? My mouth, Stuart smiled. Go to sleep. I'll call back later. He means I'll call back later, his sister said dryly. Thank you. Both of you. We can talk all day tomorrow, Stuart. If you want. Night-night. The human just said night-night and hung up on you. And me, said View Lart single quote H in an intrigued voice. Mostly me, since it's officially me calling. He has a name. Stuart single quote H perched on the edge of the lunger beside her. I know. It's your fault for naming your pet after him. Now I don't know what to call either of them. Alden. And? Other Alden. The Rhea single quote T and the other Rhea single quote T. Not confusing in the slightest. She shoved herself back into her cushions. After a moment, she said, Stu, are you alright these days? He sighed. I would be much more alright if you would all stop wanting things for me that I don't want for myself. She smiled. You're still angry with me. I don't know why you thought I wouldn't side with the others. It's only the small matters I allow myself to be careless about. You are not a small matter. One of her hands rummaged under a golden yellow pillow and pulled out one of her long sticks. She held the dark tube out to him, and he lit it with a flick of his fingers. You've always been such a beautiful caster, Stu. He stood. Thank you for calling Alden, he said stiffly. I would appreciate it if you did me the favor again when he has finished resting. I'll do all manner of favors for you, baby brother. She drew on the stick and sent a cloud of blue smoke toward the ceiling. Consider doing just one for me in return. Chapter 103 Alden was constantly reminding himself to be careful of cultural differences and, more importantly, personality differences when he spoke to the son of the primary. For example, if, when you were sleepy and focused on not biting your own tongue, you said, we can talk all day tomorrow, Stu of House Art single quote H did not hear, we can talk lots. He heard, call me at the crack of dawn and stay on the line with me until one of us needs sleep. Alden was in his boxers, kneeling on his learning cushion and getting in some practice time with his Oriad when the call came in. Startled, he threw the iridescent indigo loop over his head, leaped to his feet and ran to the closet. 30 seconds later, he was dressed in the first things he'd laid his hands on, jeans and one of the moisture-wicking black turtlenecks Leaf Song had sent him in the replacement human necessities package. I didn't intend to wear one of these unless I got really lazy about the laundry, he thought as he accepted the call. They were comfortable, but they were turtlenecks and the material was faintly shiny, like silk. He was on the fence about whether it was a tolerable amount of shiny or not. "Good morning, human Alden," said Violart single quote H. She was outside leaning against the mirrored wall of the house, waving at him with fingers covered in thick rings. It almost looked like she was wearing hand armor. "My brother wants to, thank you, Viol." Stuart snatched the tablet. "Hey, you actually managed to take it from her," said Alden as the Artonan boy scurried down one of the outdoor paths. "She let me. She's busy right now." "Good morning. I'm very happy you want to talk all day. I was afraid our opportunities for conversation would be limited by your schooling." "That's right. I did say." Stuart would understand if Alden explained that he'd been exaggerating. But he looked excited. It was rare for him to show excitement, so he might actually have been very excited. They'd spoken for hours at a time on most of their previous phone calls. There was a lot of ground to cover when you lived on different planets, didn't know that much about each other, and only got one chance to talk every 2-ish weeks. It isn't really that weird for him to think all day means all day. "Yes. I can't actually talk to you when I'm in class, but you can. Observe and comment. I can text you, too, if that works. Your sister's paying for it, so." "Technically she isn't," said Stuart single quote H. "Viol may use common system resources like this as much as she pleases. It would be kind of hard to argue that she shouldn't be able to." "All right. You have a learning cushion." "Oh, we're zoomed out so he can see stuff around me." Thank goodness he'd been practicing from memory and not with his spell books this morning. It was only because yanking them from system storage was too expensive to bother with for just a few minutes. He usually waited until he was settling down for at least an hour or so at a time. "I do." Alden looked down at the faux leather cushion. "There were some at the lab with Kibby. I liked them. You'll get to see some of them in one of my classes today, too. But I can't really find any as nice here on Earth. They all seem to be more cheaply made." "That's appalling, greater than," said Stuart with a frown. "Does your new school not have proper respect for the sanctity greater than of your education?" Wow. Alden had temporarily forgotten his plan to send Kibby videos of his classes so that she could round about late teachers and people who ate chips during the sacred hours of knowledge acquisition. "It's fine. Human school is less. It's not always less serious. If you'd been watching my talent development class last night, the magic and physical education I wanted to attend this program for, you'd have seen it can be very serious. But my daily classes aren't as formal as an Artonan school." "Whirly Roden is unusually informal for an instructor," Stuart said. "Yeah, I can't imagine most teachers threaten their students that much. It is barely forgivable in his case because he manages to present it as a consequence of eccentrically high passion for his field and exacting standards." "You're saying he gets away with being mean because he's so gifted everyone else really does come across as inferior when he's around," said Alden. "That's not perfectly accurate, but it's close. People are probably just afraid to complain after they've sat through a class." "He's pushing the boundaries of student tolerance farther than he should lately," said Stuart. "His assignments are becoming more punitive greater than educational." "The dissections." Alden gasped. "Are you criticizing an instructor?" Stuart turned his nose up. "I am merely saying that when a couple of my classmates lose their composure and seek vengeance, I may not be able to condemn them for it." Line of asterisks. Alden was sure roommate code dictated you not spring a sentence like, "I have this very important Artonan friend, and he's watching us all through the system, on innocent people before 6:15 a.m. The guys deserved to wake up without being observed by the curious wizard in Alden's head. And Stuart was curious about everything. "Who is that?" he asked, as Alden stepped out of his room with his messenger bag slung over his shoulder and encountered Luke coming from the opposite one. "What is that animal on the wall?" "Oh, another boy. What's his name? How many people do you live with now?" Instead of responding to the question stream right away, he jogged through the kitchen and out into the corridor. When he was safely out of the room, he answered, "I'm living with 3 other boys, The one with the pale hair is Loot. He took the stairs down to the first floor. The animal on the wall was a polar bear. Not a real one. The boy with the dark hair is Hoyu. Loot's a chainer. We'll see him in a few hours. Hoyu is a stamina brute who's planning to pick up some spell and skill overlaps with the strength subclass. Why? I think it's mostly because that's what his mom and dad both do, said Alden. But I haven't asked. We're just getting to know each other. They call it a Dura Brute build. He wants to have some more offensive abilities without losing the advantages of his class. I see. What are those plants? After a brief tour of the garden and a trip across campus, Alden ended up drinking coffee and eating vegan sausage rolls in the student area on the roof of the Forthright building. He was the only one up there. The early hour and the gloomy weather were probably keeping everyone else indoors. I just remembered something I wanted to ask you, said Alden, when Stuart's questions finally stopped for a moment. There's a food they served us when we were working on campus at Leafsong. I think they sell it at one of the restaurants nearby, too. It's this short, thick tube. It's crunchy. It's cooked in hot oil maybe. And inside, it's full of some kind of vegetable. And the vegetable tastes like meat. To me. Earth meat. I really want to know what it is, so I can try to import it. Stuart was in the woods right now, preparing a hunting game for his Rehab single quote T. He had a small basket full of creatures he was calling bugs for her to find. They did look like beetles, if beetles were rat-sized. Was it coated in a substance similar to coagulating greater than blood? Stuart asked. I was thinking of it as a delicious sauce, but now that you mention it. Yes? The tubes are K-Rethgen. The majority of the first and second wave of settlers greater than to Ortona 3 were from a culture in which it is popular. The vegetable you like is native to 3, and colloquially greater than it's called meat petal. So I'm sure that's what you mean. Meat petal, said Alden reverently. Stuart gave him an odd look. Hey, you've got giant bugs crawling up your arm. I'm not the strange one. Meat petal is a great name for a plant. They don't bite, said Stuart, knocking the two escapee beetles back into the basket. Meat petal does, though. The jungles of 3 are known for their carnivorous plant life. It bites? The masticating petals greater than snap shut when something touches them. Alien Venus flytrap. Let's eat it. He was soon distracted from his plans to import alien plant life, though. Stuart had stopped walking. He set down his bugs, shook his arm slightly, and a soft loop of string slithered out from under the loose sleeve of the coat he was wearing and fell into his hand. His Oriot. For a second, Alden wondered if it was a new one. Then he realized it wasn't quite unbonded white. It was just a very pale shade of purple. Like his father's hair was. Or like his sister Cena's had been. Alden felt an unexpected urge to compliment him on it. Then he realized he had no idea how to do that or if it was even appropriate, so he just watched in silence while Stuart cast a spell. Something was different about the way he used it. Alden couldn't quite put his finger on what it was, and the spell was over too quickly. A scoop of soil was taken from the ground as if by an invisible trowel. Stuart dropped a beetle into the hole and kicked the dirt and leaves back over it with a booted toe. They'll just sit there, he explained. Alden fixates greater than on visually tracking her prey. She needs to practice using her sense of smell, too. Human Alden was too busy watching the young wizard's hands as he cast again to answer. Stuart was elegant and precise. Alden had seen him make Wevy before, so that wasn't a surprise. And he wasn't faster with his hands than Alden was, but the string was moving through the patterns. It moves more for him than for me. It was almost like Stuart had a couple of additional fingers to use. Alden touched a hand to the base of his neck. His own Oriot had been getting more and more helpful. He could make it tighten or cling just by wanting it to. So maybe one day, they'd be at that level, too. You're quiet suddenly, said Stuart. Are you sad the bugs will be eaten? You don't have to observe if you don't want to. It's not that. I was just really enjoying watching you work. I hope other Alden has fun with her hunt. Stuart paused with a beetle held in his hand over the 5th hole, Then he dropped it in and covered it up. He looked away from his task to examine Alden. Then he held up his right hand. The loops of string draping his fingers shone. "This is my Ariad," he said. "It's a casting tool. A more personal type of one. I've had it since I was small. It aids me in shaping my authority for more complex spells. It gives me focal points. Let me think how to." He trailed off. "He's trying to think of how to explain it to me," Alden thought as he took in the look of concentration on Stuart's face. "It's like a helpful hand that works alongside my intentions to perform magic," Stuart said finally. There was a note of annoyance in his voice at the inadequate description. "It's part of me. A piece of my power. I don't know if that will sound reasonable to you. I can't quite imagine how to say it otherwise." "Thank you, Stuart," Alden said. "I understand what you mean." "Do you?" Alden wanted to say yes, "I really do." He tried to think of how to do it without revealing personal experience. "You look. There's an English saying, comfortable in your own skin. You look like that when you use it." He waited. Stuart blinked a few times, then he smiled. "That's a pleasing thing to hear." "There's a bug on your shoulder," said Alden, brushing the last crumbs of the sausage roll off his hands. "Better start digging." Line of asterisks. Stuart's presence was a major distraction during the science lecture. It wasn't his fault. He was minding his own business out in his forest with his T. But a video feed of a small red dragon hunting buried beetles was much more entertaining than organic chemistry. Other Alden was a capable but lazy bug finder. She would dig one up with her large hind claws, eat some favorite squishy part out of its interior, then flap back to Stuart to cling to his shoulders or his legs and make begging sounds. "I am not going to dig up the next one for you," he said every time. "Go hunt." "Go hunt" was obviously a phrase the knew, since she would always head off to hunt when he said it. But she had a habit of running right back to him and begging more whenever it took her longer than 30 seconds to sniff out her prey. "I don't have a future as an animal trainer," thought Alden, watching Stuart shoo her again. If the he had made that sad little gurgling noise at him, he would have delivered her beetles to her on a platter. "Do you ever take her with you to school?" he asked. He couldn't text in logograms yet, so Stuart would just have to rely on system translation. He looked up in surprise. "I will when she's fully trained. The jungle campus will be good for her, but she needs to learn that not all creatures wish to play with her. Are you able to focus on your class and speak to me at the same time?" "Not really. But you're educational, too, right?" Stuart lifted a brow. "Do you want me to talk to you about polymers greater than? I've been listening to your instructor. I don't think I can improve on her lecture. Not a chemistry expert. I have basic knowledge. If she were lecturing you on how spells and elementally aligned ingredients can be used to transmogrify various materials, I would have much more to say." "You mean spells that turn one thing into another? Do you like that kind of magic?" "I do," said Stuart. "But I like most kinds of magic. The boy in front of you is trying to get your attention. I believe he wants his beverage now." Turning his thoughts away from the forest back toward the classroom was a jarring experience. The theater-style lecture hall full of creaking seats, clicking keyboards, and sighing students surrounded him. Finley kept glancing hopefully over his shoulder. "Sorry, man," Alden whispered. "I zoned out. You could have texted." Finley was an extreme fan of caffeination, and he'd brought 2 drinks to class again. So Alden had been holding on to a hot tea for him with one hand. He dropped his skill, and the smell of Earl Grey hit his nose. He passed it forward, and Finley grinned at him. It was so convenient not to have to move around to preserve things anymore. Does your skill improve your life?" Stuart asked. What a loaded question, thought Alden. Doubly so, considering who was asking, and the future he had planned for himself. "It's an amazing skill," Alden replied. "It helped me save someone I care about, and I enjoy it in a lot of ways. I was excited to be selected as an avowed, but if I never had been, I would definitely have been safer. And possibly happier in the long run." Or maybe I'd just be different. It's hard to know for sure. You really answered, said Stuart, an unreadable look on his face. Alden leaned back until his seat creaked. That's a fraction of an answer for that question. I don't think I even know the complete one yet. You should ask me again sometime when we are face to face if you're still curious. You'll still be my guest? Sure. If you pick a good date for both. December 15th, Stuart said promptly. It is your weekend. And I will not be in school either. I will persuade Vuel to send you an invitation. Alden stared. So Stuart had totally already picked out the date and... Yeah. That was soon. So soon. Don't get freaked out. He's not summoning you to do anything dangerous. He wants to serve you beverages out of the pink quartz pitcher. And do whatever it is Artonan knights in waiting do when they have friends over. The 15th is good for me. But if you wanted to wait another week, I'll actually be out of school for 11 days starting on the 23rd. It needs to be sooner, said Stuart quickly. That is to say, I'll be busy with something during that time. And I hope to see you before then. If you don't mind. You don't have to come if... December 15th, Alden texted. Perfect date. I'm putting your name on my calendar. Truly. Stuart smiled. Yes, truly. He couldn't put things like parkour club meet-up in Parc des Batteries on the calendar and leave off go to another planet. Line of asterisks. Stuart usually got more relaxed the longer they talked, but even when he was relaxed there was a distance between them that no amount of forced casualness on Alden's part would bridge. There were things the Artonan boy hinted at but never explained, the exact nature of his unhappiness with his schoolmates, why he was frustrated with his family, what was up with his many eccentricities. He had finally gotten the foot fully healed. He mentioned it to Alden in the middle of showing off his Riabi single quote tease clause. It was like, you can stop worrying about me now. My contemplations on the nature of my ignorance and failures are complete, so I told a healer to fix the burning pains I've been enduring for more than 8 months. No big revelations about what those contemplations were, and his tone didn't invite questions. Things like that made it so damn hard to get to know him. If he were anyone else, if I were anyone else, I don't think I'd be able to connect with him at all. But what Alden did know about Stuart's single quote H was so significant that it largely made up for the gaps in his understanding. And it was obvious that the primary son was trying hard all the time. Even when Alden couldn't fathom what the other boy was thinking, he could see the vast amounts of effort he was putting in. It was hard not to like someone when you could see them struggling to get that right. But Stuart, dude, I wish you'd put just a little less effort into this, Alden thought as he sat in engaging with the unexpected and listened to the Artonan's slightly too shrill sounds of offense. Alden. Your classmates clearly need guidance. Look at them. Just look. They are biting at each other's throats, and not in an enjoyable manner, and you are just sitting there quietly. I'm not suggesting that Instructor Marion change the course format no matter how often you ask. They are too young to engage in this type of debate. They are merely arguing with each other for fun at this point, not seeking accord. Greater than, too young. You fed yourself to an illegally summoned squid monster because you were trying so hard to make friends with the other baby wizards. Don't think I'll ever forget. You know, I'm pretty sure Artonans argue with each other like this, too, Alden said. Joe's descriptions of the Grand Senate's decision-making processes were, unfortunately, unforgettable. Not in class, Stuart said in an affronted tone. Not unless we were nurtured by a species of loud, foul-smelling parrot-like creatures known for consuming their nestmates. Greater than, Alden raised his hand. Instructor Marion whistled to stop the verbal battle that had been going on for the past several minutes. It had started out as a relatively serious discussion about whether it was alright for a hero to disable a pursuing superchaser's vehicle if they had reason to believe that the chaser was endangering themselves with reckless driving, but after that, it had somehow devolved into a fight about image rights and whether chasers who were known to deliberately cut and splice footage to make heroes look bad could be considered attackers when they showed up on the scene. I think we've gotten off topic again. We're acting like a bunch of Gokurach, said Alden. Stuart's eyes widened. "Can't we talk about the next case?" Alden continued. "It seems more serious to me anyway." The whole class and instructor Marion were silent and staring, no doubt at the system's translation for Gokarach. Finally, the boy who'd been the most pugnacious about the image rights fight said, "What, you just want to finish this case off really fast with your rabbit powers?" It was the guy who Alden had been privately thinking of as 3-Minute Man, from his first ever class, the one who'd assured everyone he could solve the domestic violence case in 3 minutes. "I could finish this one in 3 minutes, said Alden. "The first one is to ask myself why I'm loaded up with magic gear while I chase a sulker mom's minivan down the freeway. Am I working for a city so desperate for dramatic battle footage that looking cool supersedes highway safety? The second minute is for me to think, oh, there are a bunch of superchasers following me. Now it's even more of a disaster. And the third is for me to text the soccer mom and say, look, I like living on Anzidora just fine. The school system's great for your kids. You don't get to live a normal life ever again anyway, so maybe think about coming in on your own when you're less panic-stricken. Then I turn around and go about my day in the least sensational way possible. And? That was an unvarnished opinion. Now I sound judgmental and jaded. Your solution is to send the villain a text message then go home. She's a C-rank brute who didn't want to move to Point Nemo, said Alden. Not a terrorist. Why was a dramatic chase ever appropriate to start with? Instructor Klein, wait, is it safe to invoke him of all people? It doesn't feel safe. But I've started. I can't just stop halfway. Alden had been doing so well up until now, carefully typing up his arguments for this class and editing them until they sounded better and less annoyed. Somehow, this is Stuart's fault. Instructor Klein says we should be willing to finish the job ourselves, he said. But he also says it's sometimes appropriate to let someone run if chasing them does more harm than good. So when an unexpected event occurs during the middle of what was already a questionable chase, I say quit. One of the third-year girls turned around in her desk. Who cares about that? Did you call us stinky cannibal parrots? Technically he said we, so he was calling himself a stinky cannibal parrot, too. Gokach, said Andre under his breath. Gokovich. Instructor, does Gokarech fall under the no disrespectful language rule? Because I think we should add it to the class vocabulary. Is Gokarech the plural or the singular? Alden. Instructor Marion said in a tired voice. Sorry about that. No alien species names. I have a hard enough time deciding where to draw the line with human insults. Understood. What if we just said stinky cannibal parrot in English, instructor? Someone asked. Is that too disrespectful? A very long way away from their classroom, there was an alien boy covering his face with a hand. Line of asterisks. My roommate will be in the next class, Alden said, heading back toward the forthright building behind a group of chattering students. A cold raindrop splashed against his forehead, and he looked up at the dark clouds. I'm going to tell him you were listening in. Stuart was back in his room, working on metal for another spell ring. It was a chore he'd assigned himself so that he wouldn't get too impassioned and prompt you to insult fellow students. Lute's a chainer. So we're practicing the hand signs for a word chain together while I correct his or tone and language. As soon as he said it, he realized that Lute might not be supposed to teach him anything until that conversation with his boss happened. Alden didn't know if there was some rule about what amount of instruction was allowed. He's setting up a meeting with the wizard he works for to let him know, he added quickly. Yes. Stuart looked up from his metal block. His expression was carefully guarded. I was trying to understand the nature of your relationship with him after I heard his class. The nature of our relationship? Alden asked. We're getting to know each other. We're roommates. He was fun to spend time with the other day, and he's a good tutor. I think we'll be friends. Why would his class matter? Stuart still looked cautious. You did say you were suffering from the bad half of a word chain last night. I assumed it was your own, but then. Luke gave me the good half earlier in the day. I can't cast it myself yet. So he was doing you a favor. Stuart said in a relieved tone. You don't prostrate yourself greater than beneath his feet after the feast greater than. Alden stopped walking. Another raindrop hit his nose. I don't what now? He said. Completely in English. He'd been speaking Artonan with just a few words peppered in to cover vocab failings, but there were some levels of confusion so great that they could only be conveyed in your native tongue. I don't what? He said again. I'm so relieved, said Stuart. I didn't think that particular subculture had made it to Earth yet. There's very little overlap greater than between them and the majority of wizards. But you spent a long time on Thagund, so you might have encountered their ideas and found them persuasive. It would have been fine if you had. They serve the Triplanets, too, in their own way. Many refuse to acknowledge their place in our society, but their cultural and practical value has been affirmed by the Grand Senate. Some of our most powerful word chains wouldn't even exist without their zealous perseverance. Greater than and considering my family's relationship with them, it would be extremely improper for me to judge you for finding spiritual meaning greater than where you wished. Rain had started to fall in earnest, and Alden sprinted for forthright. Stuart's wildly indecipherable rapid-fire reassurances that he would absolutely still respect Alden if Alden wanted to be someone who derived spiritual meaning from Lukeville rang in his ears. What the heckity heck? He thought as he hustled. He'd heard that word chains had religious significance to Artonans. The teacher with the lasered hairline had insisted on it, actually. But he'd yet to find evidence. Kibby had appreciated them more as aesthetic and ritualistic objects. She thought they sounded pretty and felt magic-y. On the Artonan soaps and sitcoms he'd seen, nobody who did word chains acted differently than Alden would have expected. Now Stuart was throwing around all kinds of interesting words. I'm really glad you respect my freedom of religion, said Alden as he dashed into the building. But I have no idea what you're saying. He suddenly spied a blonde head beelining for the stairs. A very short blonde head. Luke spun around. Oh. Hey, Alden. You left in a hurry this morning. That's what I wanted to talk to you about, Alden texted, swiping beads of rain off his messenger bag. It was waterproof. Good to know. I didn't want to surprise you guys first thing. I'm talking to my Artonan friend today. We're on a video call right now, and he can see my surroundings. So maybe you don't want to go so hard on the colorful language in class? Luke pointed at him. You and Hoyu went to your fancy gym and absorbed potions together last night. I wondered when I smelled the watermelon. Lexi looked like he crawled from his own grave this morning, and you two are all springy. Alden blinked. We did our homework in the recovery sauna. Luke didn't even bat an eye at the news that Alden was mid-call with an alien. He must have been even more used to Artonans than Alden had realized. Ha! Next time Lexi makes fun of me for eating sandwiches in the tub, I'll just remind him he's the only one in the room practicing asceticism. By the way, your dishwashing session last night was legendary. The forks. Luke dramatically stumbled and flung his hand out. Stuart had a very interested expression on his face. He had completely stopped playing around with his spell ring metal. Alden winced. What happened to the eating utensils? Stuart asked. I dropped them. You dropped them more than anyone has ever dropped them, Luke said gleefully. He led the way toward the stairs. Hey, do you think it would be a crime to put a mousetrap in my shoes? A mousetrap? Alden asked. I assume Shoepisser is using magic to target them because otherwise the hall cameras would record their nasty deed, right? But just in case they're doing it old school, a mousetrap might work. A lot of stars would have to align, but if they did. Luke's laugh was close to a nefarious cackle. It echoed off the walls in the stairwell. Stuart's head tilted so far sideways it looked like it was in danger of falling off his neck. I do not think his words are being properly translated. What is Shoepisser? Dude, I am impressed by your ability to be yourself in front of anyone. But do you really want me to have to define and try to explain Shoepisser to my friend? I don't want him to think humans are gross. How disturbing, said Stuart. I guess it was being translated correctly. Alden almost tripped up the stairs. "Lute, have you been getting my texts?" he asked. "Recently? No." "Stuart," Alden hissed under his breath. "You?" Stuart looked down at his metal cube and started wiggling his fingers over it like it was a fascinating business. "It was only 2 messages," he said. "I wasn't even sure it was an accident at Phi." "Yes, you were. You're still a terrible liar." "Your face is turning purple." Alden focused more carefully. Apparently, he could make mental texting mistakes when he was trying to do it with multiple people in multiple languages, and he let himself get too relaxed. "Lute, hi. I was trying to tell you earlier. I'm on a video call with my Ayrtonian friend right now. We're hanging out together today. He can hear what you're saying. My nosy friend," he added aloud for both of their benefits. Stuart made a sound of protest. Lute had stopped under the sign for the 6th floor. The look that crossed his face was hard to read, somewhere between confused and amused, like Alden had told a joke he didn't quite get. "Are you serious?" "Yes," said Alden. I see. Let me." His fingers tapped through the air, and a second later, Alden received a message from him. "Is this person actually your friend? Like a person you gossip about teachers and girls with because it's more interesting than focusing on class? Or is he a friend in some more complicated he's nice but also he's paying me to give him a tour way?" "I meant it the first way," said Alden. The door beside Lute creaked open and a gaggle of science track students poured onto the stairs. Some of them went up, others down, their feet pounding and their shoes squeaking on the damp steps. "Right," said Lute. Hello, Alden's friend." Stuart looked up. "Tell him I greet him," he said. "I would add him to our call, but I would have to have Buell change the settings and I can't interrupt her practice right now." "He says hi," Alden texted Lute. "He's sorry he can't add you into the call. His sister set it up for him. He can't actually call out on his own yet." Lute looked surprised. "He is a kid." "Yes. I am not," Stuart protested. "I'm nearly an adult." "He's around our age," Alden clarified. "I'm older than you. I think he's actually younger in terms of maturity level." Stuart stared at him in such perfect and profound shock that it more than made up for the text messaging mishap. Line of asterisks. Ayrtonian conversation class had never before involved such an impossible amount of mental juggling. Stuart was busy being outraged by literally everything going on in the classroom, but that didn't stop him from wanting Alden to convey messages to Lute. And Lute seemed to have developed a split personality of his own. He was a little nervous that an Ayrtonian was watching him teach Alden a word chain, but he was also enthusiastic about having someone answer the burning questions Alden and the system were unable to. "How do I say dickwad?" Lute whispered, his eye fixed on Alden's forehead. That seemed to be where he looked when he was actually talking to Stuart. "Really?" Alden asked. "Tell him I will attempt to come up with a translation in a moment. Look. Just look. That learning cushion has a stain." "Really?" Alden asked again. "Well, I suppose it hardly matters," said Stuart, his voice rising an octave. "They've put you in an instructional environment so far below your level, I'm surprised you do not rise from that ass-abused greater than cushion and make a righteous scholarly exit greater than. You know," Alden texted him, "I'm starting to think you want me to be expelled. There has to be a better school. This is literally one of the best schools on the island. It's so much better than my old one. Human school is just more relaxed about a few things. People are allowed to eat in classes here, so sometimes stuff gets stained. It will probably be cleaned or replaced at the end of the term." It totally wouldn't. The stain he was upset about was really small. While Stuart freaked out over Instructor Rao's bizarrely disinterested teaching style for the 11th time, Alden let Lute correct one of his hand signs and informed him that there was an Ayrtonian vulgarity for things that had been set on with butt cheeks when they shouldn't have been. Stuart fretted and Lute practiced the word for ass abused, and Alden decided he'd juggled the two of them for long enough. It was time for him to get his own burning question answered. "All right, this is more of a text message-only conversation," he sent to Lute while the chainer nudged his left elbow inwards to correct his signing form. My friend seemed concerned I might be someone who prostrated myself before you at a feast. Or a fancy dinner? Do you know what that's about? I know it sounds CRA. Luke made such a high-pitched yelp of alarm it would have done Andertonen proud. Several people turned to look at them. Stuart paused his rant. Oh dear. Is he very upset? Does he need comforting? I'm fine, Luke said to their classmates. Pulled a muscle. Sitting down? A girl said. I'm fucking talented, okay? Said Luke. Artonen only in class, everyone. Called instructor Rao. Luke was looking at Alden in utter horror. Alden smiled apologetically. Sorry if it's a weird or sensitive subject, it's both. Luke fixed his eye on Alden's forehead again, pointed, and said. No. Is he talking to me? Stuart asked. Luke started typing furiously. I don't want you to hear about my job from someone who's going to make it sound like that. So people don't prostrate themselves before you. Luke's expression was mortified. Relax, said Alden. I'm teasing. I know Artonens can get hyper-poetic about the simplest things. I was planning to let my boss tell you stuff, since I can't. But I wanted to hear what he said as he said it and toned it down. And I was sure he wouldn't talk about that at all, since. For reasons. It's fine. I'll tell my friend to leave it alone. He focused on Stuart. Luke's embarrassed about his job a little, and he wants to control the way it's presented to me. Stuart looked surprised. He picked Vuel's tablet up from the stand where it had been propped and squinted at it as if trying to get a better look at Luke. Is he not pleased with his work for the Palace of Unbreaking greater than? He sounded very concerned. That's. Well, I suppose I should respect his wishes and allow him to tell you about it? It's fine, Luke, Alden texted. He says he respects your wishes. Are you just saying that to make me feel better? Luke asked suspiciously. I never imagined an avowed assigned to that service would be embarrassed about it, Stuart mused. The work should be easy, but those people can be very odd. Line of asterisks. Alden spent lunchtime eating cafeteria food out of a to-go container in the dorm. All of his roommates were out, so there was no need for warnings or three-way conversational confusion. Hey, what should I wear when I come to your house? Alden asked, propping his feet up on the ottoman. Stuart was still enchanting his metal block. Either the task wasn't going well with all the distractions, or it just took forever. Something cleaner than last time. Are you being funny? Maybe. Alden smiled. Well, I was being serious. If I'm showing up at your house as your guest, I don't want to make you look bad or make your family uncomfortable. If there are rules or customs I should follow, you need to tell me so I can get that right. The more he thought about it, the more he hoped Stuart would send him a manual for how to get along with people in the night's private forest. Maybe how to get along with the plant life, too, for that matter. A bunch of roots had responded to his request for freedom last time he was there, and his leaf bookmark still seemed to be alive, so yeah. He didn't want to offend the trees. Alden, I've been wondering for a while, but we've never talked about it. What do you actually know about my family? Alden thought of bodies falling in the snow. The first time I ever heard of a Knight of the Mother Planet was when you were declaring your intention to become one by the pond, he said. The one with the mission in it. Stuart sighed. I knew which pond you meant. I had no idea what you were talking about. But Joe said you probably had enhanced bones and you'd been modified so that you couldn't fall unconscious unless you wanted to, so I figured a knight was someone who fought something. By the way, the word doesn't translate all that well into my language. It seems to have a lot of subtle shades of meaning that aren't captured, and Earth actually translates it differently than Artona Ion 3 did. The list of alternate translations he'd requested after waking up in Night Rapport 1 had given the impression that the word was more like honored oath-bound guard servant. So he guessed the word knight was just doing its best. Superior Professor Rodin shouldn't say things about me when he doesn't know, Stuart said. He sounds peeved. Alden was surprised. Was he wrong? Stuart frowned. Even though my body has been enhanced, it's still rude of him to guess at it and tell people. and I don't have any unnatural methods of preventing a loss of consciousness. I was bending nearly my whole mind toward not panicking or fainting. It was effort, not magical modification. It was an impressive effort, Alden said. I was very confused by you, but undeniably impressed. I bet Rodin has tricks and toys to adjust his consciousness. And now Joe's been downgraded all the way to Rodin. He probably does. The primary son still looked miffed. Anyway, said Alden, I guessed then that knights did some kind of battle. And then your aunt was there decorrupting Munthagund by throwing around all the dirt. It's much more complicated than that. So naturally I am aware that knights are the wizards who are at the forefront of the fight against chaos. And I've caught on to the clothing difference. Stuart looked startled. Isn't that common knowledge? Not common enough to filter down to a regular teenager on Earth. Some avowed are obviously more up to date. Nia had called them extra special warriors against chaos, and she at least suspected they had talents like avowed in addition to their wizardry. Which was actually a piece of knowledge Kibby didn't possess even with Joe's tendency to share important top-secret night news with the assistants. For some reason, the wizard class didn't make a lot of noise about how night had worked for even the non-wizard Artonans to pick up on. I caught on to the shorter sleeves and the metal decorations, so I confined knights in a crowd. Because of that, I realized your family seems to have a mix of knights and wizards. Obviously I see Vulart's single quotations title when she calls, so I know she's one. And? He hesitated. I'm sure having a position like that involves a lot of difficulty and sacrifice. That was all he felt like saying over the phone. It does, Stuart said softly. Then he cleared his throat. All right. You understand well enough. Our household can be formal on certain dates and occasions, but I'm not inviting you to visit on one of those. The only custom you need to follow on a normal day is addressing all of the knights by their title when you first meet them. They'll immediately give you permission to stop because my family doesn't use titles at home except to acknowledge important life events. Straight to business then. I can do that. You can wear whatever human clothes you want, or if you want to be fashionable greater than I can send you images of what is currently popular for non-professional clothing here on the mother planet. I kind of want to see what that looks like regardless of whether I wear it or not. If you do not mind. It's my personal opinion that you should not wear clothing with writing on it unless the writing is meaningful to you. Alden sat up in surprise. Writing? Stuart let his hands snap up briefly in the same gesture Kibby had usually used for a shrug. Artonans did shoulder shrugs, too. Alden was going to have to check and see which one was more shruggy. I do understand that dress customs are not the same on Earth. But we're used to reading the markings on clothing to learn important information about the wearer. Humans and images are often wearing words that I think mean nothing to them. Or the names of other people? Or cultural references that are hard to grasp even if I research. And it's difficult to determine whether a human wants me to care about the meaning of the words or if they are just decorating themselves with the shapes. Oh, said Alden. It reminds you of the symbols on knight and wizard outfits, so it feels like you have to pay attention to it. It's usually just advertising. But it's not always advertising. Sometimes it's a saying the person likes our uniform for their workplace. I see how that could be confusing. Yes, said Stuart. It will be overlooked as a species preference if you like to adorn yourself in that way, but you asked about making people comfortable. Most would find it distant greater than for you to wear your commendation alongside something meaningless. Alden tried to picture himself having the special symbol that went with Alisart's single quotations commendation embroidered on a t-shirt for a pizza joint. I wouldn't do that anyway. Am I supposed to wear the commendation? Do you not want to? Alden wished Stuart would be a little more expressive right now. He couldn't tell from the Artonan boy's face if he cared about the answer or not. I want to do whatever's respectful and appropriate, Alden said carefully. I don't understand the etiquette. That's not good. There's a lot of etiquette. Alden grimaced. Coming from someone he'd once seen count out the individual grains of a particular spice before he dropped them in the Wevy kettle, that didn't bode well. It's really a lot, said Stuart. Line of asterisks. They spent the whole afternoon together, except for a few breaks when Stuart left the tablet behind for a couple of minutes. During Intro to Other Worlds, Alden received a lesson on the etiquette of when and how he should wear the embroidery when he was on the Triplanets. He wished he could have remained blissfully ignorant. It was so complicated there was no way he was going to get through without embarrassing himself at some point. And that might be the same as embarrassing the quaternary. Actually, Stuart kept using the English words tarnish and honor, which he had learned especially for that long-ago apology he'd delivered in front of all the other teens at Leaf Song. Alden still wasn't sure exactly how they'd both gotten tarnished back then. He didn't want to freak out his roommates any more than he already had. So he spent the late afternoon and early evening away from campus. Stuart wanted to see things you find beautiful about your world. It was a tall order. The temperature had dropped, and the rain had turned into a real storm. It was 40 degrees Fahrenheit and howling outside. They rode a lot of public transportation and did some people watching. Alden had gotten a woman on the bus to entrust him with one of his own plastic ponchos, so when he did step out into the weather it was surprisingly tolerable. After a couple of tries he'd mastered the poncho shield. The ideal thing was to ignore the sleeve holes and stick his arms inside. Then he could either jump to make the whole oversized covering balloon out prior to preserving it, or he could flap around inside it until he'd gotten a similar shape. Roominess between his body and the shielded plastic made walking around possible, and bonus, he now looked even cooler than people normally did while wearing what was effectively a garbage bag with a hood. "This is the traditional garb of my people," he told Stuart as he walked through the open-air market where he'd met Dave Banu, the long sight, for a chat about B-rank superheroing. "We all dress like this when our tonans aren't looking." "Do you?" Stuart said in an amused voice. He was sitting on the floor beside his bed nook, and other Alden was using him as a climbing frame. "Yes. This is true human beauty." Most of the places in the market were still open. Anisidorans weren't strangers to bad weather, and wet shielding in deeply recessed stalls made shopping manageable. But not far from the end of the market, down by the water, was an area without any roofing or shields. There, the waves were crashing into the soil and sending up clouds of spray. Alden went to watch it. His shoes were soaked and his feet were freezing, but he'd had the sense to roll up his pants at least. The shielded poncho was keeping the rest of him warm enough, and there were some other positives he hadn't realized would be so nice. The wind that whipped his ankles and stung his face when he turned his head in the wrong direction wasn't touching the rest of him except as an occasional swirl of air that found its way in from the bottom. And the raindrops that should have been loud against the plastic were soundless. He could still hear sounds coming in from the open front of the hood, but the muffling was nice. The constant pressure on his skull from the wind and rain was an interesting feeling, too. He couldn't pick out the impact of individual raindrops. It was far too many little things hitting him all at once. But it occurred to him that if he wanted to refine his sensitivity in that area, standing out in the rain wasn't a bad plan. Or under a shower, but that didn't have the same drama. A large wave burst against magic and concrete, and Alden stood in the spray, licking salt off his lips. "Do you like that spot?" Stuart asked. "I think I really do." He was very nearly alone out here. Godspeed to any drone smaller than a helicopter trying to fly in this weather. And good luck to anyone not packing magic that would protect them from a gale. Probably there were other oddballs having fun somewhere else. He could definitely imagine Vandy trying to sky shape in this. He's seen her outside the girls' dorm this morning trying to trust fall into a cushion of her own breeze. She'd hit the ground. Apparently she hadn't gotten the hang of shaping while she was falling backwards. But here, now, this little patch of earth felt like Alden's own. Thagun fucking sucked. He told Stuart and the storm. Even before the contract failed, it sucked. It was still all the time. No wind. And there was almost no sound. That place felt like death even before it turned into death. "Would you like me to have Aunt Alice dig an ocean there?" "Yes." Stuart rubbed his Riabi single quote T-scaled snout. "You do know that was a joke? As far as I'm concerned, it was a promise." Another wave smashed itself against the island. Alden spun around and let the back of the poncho take it. "Alden," Stuart said hesitantly, "I have a question that I don't mean in an offensive way, but I am curious." He turned back around. "Just ask. You are attending your school because you wish to challenge yourself and busy yourself to overcome your fears." I did tell him about that weeks ago. And afterward, he told me he wished I could go to Leaf Song with him. This was the point where they connected, despite all the distance both of them created with their secrets, half-truths, and misunderstandings. On Alden's part the link was made mostly of respect, for what Stuart had been through and what he planned to go through in the future. On Stuart's, Alden wasn't sure, but he hoped it was a similar emotion. Stuart took things so seriously. It was a quality that caused a lot of headaches, but it shone when it was actually time to discuss serious matters. The graduates of your school become superheroes. That word sounds weird coming out of his mouth. "I'm still trying to fully understand the idea," said Stuart. "I've been told it's a very human idea." "Yes. It must be. It is battle against those who would harm others, and it is also battle for the sake of entertainment. Battle theater, Max called it." Alden wondered why he'd bothered arguing if even Stuart got that impression. "It is. A lot of the time. There are superheroes who don't entertain people at all, though. I have an instructor who only helps with disasters. And the Anzidora battle groups have entertaining heroes on them, but they don't do entertainment when they are called in as a team to deal with real problems. It's also the job of superheroes to capture other avowed and force them to live on Anzidora with you," said Stuart. "Even ones who don't do harm?" Alden could tell from his tone that this was the thing he worried was potentially offensive. "I understand it's illegal on your world for avowed to live among average humans." "It is," said Alden. "And, yes, that's part of the job for many superheroes. Most, I assume. Though I guess whether it's something ugly and dramatic like that case we were talking about in class today or something more reasonable must depend on the people issuing orders to the avowed. What exactly did you want to know?" "Will you do that one day?" Stuart asked. "I won't." He hadn't thought about it when he was younger, superheroes picking up completely harmless unregistered. Everyone knew they were criminals, too. And he'd taken it for granted that a criminal avowed was dangerous and probably should be caught, before Gorgon and Bo both pointed out that not registering was just a lifestyle many people preferred and not necessarily step one on the path to supervillainy. Thoughtless of me. Childish. At least there are some parts of the old Alden I'm glad to have left behind. Icy water spattered around his feet again. "I won't do it," he repeated. "Maybe I'm just as bad as those idiots in engaging with the unexpected who are always trying to make the law for avowed be whatever they want it to be. But I'm not ever going to use my magic that way. The thought of overpowering a frightened person and dragging them away from their home because it would make the rest of humanity feel better completely disgusts me." "I see," said Stuart. Alden had no idea what he thought. "What do you intend to use your magic for then?" Stuart asked. "What will you do with it?" "Are you asking me what my purpose is?" "Yes." As if that was just a thing people regularly ask each other. "You know, the last person who asked me that was your father." The Artonan boy looked away from the tablet. "Was it?" We were holding hands. Stuart's lips pursed and then, unexpectedly, he started to giggle. "He couldn't do it without holding your hands. If anyone knew. Your aunt was there. It was her idea. She doesn't count. They shared a womb." "They are twins?" "No. Two of a triplet set. Their third is no longer with them." He regained his composure and looked back at Alden expectantly. "Is asking people their purpose the family question or something?" "I fear it might be," said Stuart, giving a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I thought it was a universal quest, but I have been disappointed to find it otherwise over the past several months." Well, that explained at least some of his problem connecting to the other people his age at Leaf Song. If he expected them to be questing after life purposes instead of getting wasted and shoving gum in human pockets to see what happened. "Hey, I worry too much about this kind of thing as well," said Alden. My friend yelled at me for it recently. I do not believe I worry about it too much at all. How could it be possible to do that? You want to be perfectly noble and honorable and self-sacrificing all the time, right? And you torture yourself when you are not living up to it. I'm pretty sure it's a character flaw. It's not. Don't be embarrassed. It's both of us. We need to work on that. What in the name of the mother are you talking about? Stuart looked delightfully flummoxed. Alden smiled into the next wave. I want to use my magic to protect myself and stay alive. And I want it to be a life that's worth living. How does that sound? What does worth living mean? Stuart asked solemnly. Not endlessly shitty and full of horror, said Alden. Joyful. A lot of the time. I really need it to be that, or I'm not going to be strong enough to do anything at all. Thunder growled over the water. And when I die, he added, I want to do it feeling sure that other people are better off because I lived. He didn't have to be perfect. He didn't have to give every single part of himself away if he didn't want to. And the more okay he felt about that, the more he felt like he could actually breathe again and act again. Yeah, I think that's my purpose, he said. It's kind of simple. It's not like I have a detailed plan anymore. And it's a little more selfish than the old me would have wanted. But he didn't know himself as well as he thought. After he'd finished speaking, Stuart watched him for a long time without saying anything at all. When Alden started to shiver, he turned away from the water. Come on, he said. Let's go find someplace dry. Before you leave, I'm going to show you how to fold a paper airplane.